Good morning. Well, as I said yesterday, we're going back to look at these basic rules that Moses set out for the people. Not because we want to look back into Israelite society and see how they worked, but because these rules are essential for us. They come down to us and they show us what God is like, but the God who actually created us and understands us, he also wants to express himself to people in this way and give them guidance as to how they should live and what they should do. Let's look at them as is shown to us in the Ten Commandments. Moses, coming down from the mountain, has these commandments written on tablets of stone, written with the finger of God. God wrote them. It's the only account ever of God actually writing and communicating his ideas. So these are very, very important. Of course, when Moses came down the mountain and found that the people he was governing, these tribes who come out of Egypt, well, they were having a great party. They had set up pagan gods. They were sort of partying like it was the end of the world. And he gets so angry, he smashes the tables of stone. But later on, Moses himself had to carve another 2 tablets of stone. Go up on the mountain again, and God once again wrote. This time, in the first time, God actually carved the whole tables. But the second time, Moses carves the tables, but God again writes. He writes on these tables. And he says, this is going to be the foundation of your society. So let's look at them and see exactly what it is that God wrote. And God spoke these words, it says in chapter 20 of Exodus. First, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt and out of the land of slavery. In other words, God setting himself up and saying to the people, I am the one who was behind it. I was the one who have established you. You could have stayed in Egypt for the rest of your lives. You could have just become dispersed amongst the Egyptians. You could have become lost as the children of Jacob. But I have made a decision. I made a decision when I called Abram out of Ur the Chaldees, and later on when he left Haran and moved down into Canaan. I said to him that I was going to bless all the families of the earth through him. And I said the same thing to Isaac, and I said the same thing to Jacob. And even though Jacob went down into Egypt when Joseph was prime minister and lived in the land of Goshen, and even though they were there for almost over 400 years, yet I remembered my promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the promise will never fail. And it was I who came to you in Egypt through Moses and have led you out here into the wilderness. I am the God who was directing your history and directing your society, and I will be with you even to the end of time. You know, God had a great purpose for his Jewish people in the early days. It was, in fact, to enlighten the Gentiles and finally to allow the Messiah to be birthed. Well, God's purpose for Israel isn't finished. God's purpose for Israel goes right to the very end of time. That's why he's recalled them to that land once again in these end times. He's recalled them there in order that once again he can work through them, and in order that once again he can bless the world through them. We don't understand what this relationship is between him and Abraham and the children who came from him. They've gone through much suffering, many, many difficulties, great hardships, but God is still holding them together as a race. And he says, I am going to use you as a race to bless the world. So as we look at the Jewish people, look at them very carefully and treat them with great respect. You as a people probably have never had to go through what they've had to go through. You've never had to suffer what they've had to suffer. You've never had to experience what they've had to experience. Because with God's blessing, very often the enemy will turn against these people that God is blessing and cause all these different levels of suffering. But in the end, God's purposes are working out. And here now, at the beginning of the 10 Commandments, he is identifying himself once again. And he is saying quite simply, I am the God who is in charge of all of these things. I am the God who led you out of Egypt and out here into the desert. And I am the God who will be with you throughout the ages. Or you'll go wrong. Don't worry about that. You'll go wrong. And yes, like any parent, I will discipline you. But in the end, I will only discipline you in love. And I will bring you back over and over again until you truly become my people. And in the end days, when I regather you, I will not regather you in holiness. I will regather you almost as a rebellious race. But having brought you back into the land of Israel, I will deal with you. And finally, I will reveal myself to you, and you will honor me, and you will know me for who I am. And at that time, you will look back in the whole of your history, and you will see what I have done, and you will rejoice in the ministry you've had to the world. And now here out in the desert, in Exodus, he is saying to them, this is part of the plan, and these are the rules I'm going to give you. Amen.